Trisha hasn't been shy when it comes to calling out Colleen. And this time, Trisha has come out to expose Colleen for some things that happened behind the scenes, and how Colleen has not only manipulated Trisha, but possibly JoJo Siwa as well. Also, Trisha gives us some insight on some voice memos that Colleen sent her when everything went down. So JoJo Siwa appeared on Howie Mandel's podcast, and she defended Colleen, which really put her in hot water. JoJo claimed that the things that have come out about Colleen are all lies and just a way for the internet to capitalize off of her downfall. She says that Colleen is someone she looks up to and idolizes. And also that they became friends when JoJo was 12, which means Colleen would have been 28 years old. And during Trisha's latest podcast episode, she talks about her experience with Colleen when everything started to go down and relates that to how JoJo could have very well had a similar experience with Colleen. Trisha says that it's frustrating and hurtful to her to see that Colleen probably had JoJo defend her, who's been friends with Colleen when she was a child and has a huge child audience herself. She also points out the power imbalance between Colleen and JoJo. JoJo only had positive things to say about Colleen, and Trisha related that to herself because she thought she knew Colleen and thought she could never do the things she's getting called out for, and she thinks that JoJo feels the same way about Colleen. Trisha also thinks that Colleen told JoJo that everything that has come out has been lies. So JoJo thinks that as well. But Trisha also goes back to that and says that JoJo saying that the stuff that's been coming out is all lies doesn't make sense, since it's not like JoJo was there during Colleen's interactions with all the people calling Colleen out for being inappropriate with them. But she also says that she doesn't blame JoJo 100% because she personally knows how manipulative Colleen can be. But Trisha also doesn't blame Colleen 100% for collabing with JoJo because Trisha also collabed with JoJo herself. Trisha admits that she once did collab with JoJo at JoJo's house, and JoJo's mom was there, and it felt so weird to be doing a collab video, even though it was strictly business with a minor. But that's just how the YouTube world was like back then, and lines were blurred and things were just weird.
And I have to also preface collaborations with people, because people say they're in the same field and stuff like that, because I did a collaboration with JoJo too, and I didn't anymore after that because it was kind of like a weird, YouTube's such a weird thing because you're not acting with someone, but when you're a YouTuber and you're just going to their house, it does feel like her mom was there when I was there. But it still feels very, I don't know. It's because it's almost like what's reality, but it just feels, I don't know. It almost feels like this blurred line because I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to go hang out with a 15-year-old. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Trisha then goes on to talk about how Colleen manipulated her. When Trisha first heard about how Colleen would send her nudes out as a joke, she reached out to Colleen about it and brought it up to her. Originally, Colleen denied it, but then Colleen ended up changing her story and did a complete 180 because she did end up confirming that she did in fact lie, and she did send Trisha's nudes out as a joke. Trisha also says that Colleen was pushing really hard for them to bring back the podcast. When everything began coming out about Colleen stopped posting on her own YouTube channel, but she wanted to continue doing the podcast to show that Trisha was on her side and maybe even come out to address some things on the podcast. Colleen wanted to bring back the podcast, hoping that the situation would blow over, and she thought that bringing back the podcast would help. And Trisha feels that Colleen was using her to test the waters for her return and see what kind of feedback she got. And she pretty much wanted to throw Trisha under the bus because if Trisha did agree to that, she would have received so much backlash for sticking by Colleen's side.
Because she kept pushing to come back with the podcast. And when I started really listening to this stuff, I was kind of like, I don't know. And yes, being a skeptic, being her friend, being an influencer, yes, lies are told about you. So you're just like, okay, let me hear more. But she was constantly pushing to do the show. We're going to come back and show them. We don't, and then she was like, yeah, we'll talk about it on the show, was the first thing she said. Then she came back a couple weeks later, let's not even talk about it. We'll just come back so we can show them, look, we're friends, this kind of stuff. And I was like, that's when it started feeling icky to me because I'm like, why is she pushing coming back so much when she herself hasn't said anything? Wanting me to be the first to put out there to test the waters to see how it goes. It was so manipulative, and I would just really hate her so much for it.
Trisha also talked about her and Colleen's conversation during filming their last mukbang and how Colleen was acting when their first podcast episode dropped. Last December, when Trisha went over Colleen's to film their mukbang together, Colleen was going on about how Reddit hates her and how she's always getting canceled on there. And this shocked Trisha and confused her because she always knew Colleen to be so wholesome and sweet and a goody two-shoes. Colleen also told Trisha about Adam McIntyre and how she sent him the underwear, but she was downplaying explaining what happened. Colleen was also sharing that she was worried that Trisha was going to cancel her and thought that things would end badly because of their collab.
I remember the first time or the last time we went there, like 2020 in December or whatever, after I had my baby, like, she's like, oh yeah, Reddit hates me. I'm always getting canceled. And I was genuinely so confused. Like Moses would say, and I'd ask her, I'd be like, why do people hate you? To me, she was like unproblematic, wholesome. Like I didn't know anything about Miranda. I didn't know about anything. I just thought, oh, she's just this like goody girl. Like I just thought she was like a goody two shoes girl, just like sweet, whatever. Like that's always my image of her. Maybe because I didn't know anything about her, but I was like, oh, she's always been in a long-term relationship. She's just that person. And then she would tell me like, she'd always just tell me like one incident with, Adam about the underwear. Oh, like, like it became this thing that wasn't, and I still had no idea what it was. And then when I watched that whole situation, I'm like, okay, that's weird too. And she was like downplaying it. Like,
I know that in the mukbang video that they did together, Colleen did allude to her life getting ruined and things ending like frenemies did if her and Trisha started a podcast together. So I feel like that pretty much just backs up what Trisha was saying from Colleen's own mouth. I don't know why Colleen even agreed to doing a podcast with Trisha because it seemed like it only caused her anxiety. Colleen was even concerned with going to her own podcast people, like her advertisers and sponsors for her podcast with Trisha, because Trisha was so problematic and Colleen didn't want that to affect her own podcast by advertisers seeing that she's working with such a problematic person and possibly even pulling her ads from her other podcast with her husband Eric, which Trisha found weird.
She was concerned like going to her podcast people because they didn't want to lose ads because of me, but she's acting like I was the problematic one, and I was just like, girl, you knew all this.
Trisha also shares that when they dropped the first podcast episode together, Colleen was so worried about getting canceled. As soon as that first episode dropped, Colleen kept asking Trisha, like, are we canceled yet? Are we canceled yet? Which Trisha found to be so weird since it's not like they were doing anything wrong. Moses also weighed in and thinks that maybe Colleen knew that her past would come up and possibly even get called out for it, especially with the Trisha stuff. So Colleen was probably worried that her past was coming to haunt her.
But she always said like, we're gonna get canceled, I'm gonna get canceled, like it's gonna, right? Like, I mean, it always was very much that, and I was like so confused, like from even the first episode, are we canceled, are we canceled,
right.
like
Are we
I was
canceled
like,
yet or something?
and I was like, girl, what did you do in your past that you're so, because I'm a pretty cancelable person, and I was just like, we're fine, we're not doing anything wrong.
She knew, I mean, somewhere in the back of her head, she knew that those photos exist, those text messages about you. So I think it just like, I don't know. I still don't understand how you go and work with somebody when you know that is there.
Because she would say that stuff like, oh, like, it's going to end so badly and stuff. And I'm just like, what a weird thing to say.
Trisha also reveals that Colleen was sending her voice memos when everything started to go down. Weeks before anything came out about Colleen making fun of Trisha, Trisha was starting to feel a little off about Colleen, so she was responding less to her and kind of trying to keep her distance. So Colleen started sending Trisha voice memos all day, every day, and so many throughout the night.
I remember when I first heard about the supposedly like made fun of my weight, sent pictures and stuff like that, like weeks before it came out, I remember just feeling some type of way. And I didn't respond right away. And she kept sending me voice memos like, oh my gosh, did I lose you? Like, are you there? Like, she's like, I don't have anyone and everyone probably hates me. All my friends probably hate me. They believe this stuff, So she's like, everyone, is like not talking to me, whatever. So I just thought, so she's like telling me it's not true. She's telling me all this stuff. And then on top of that, saying that stuff. And I remember that specific one where it was like, oh no, did I lose you? And I was just like, yeah. So it's like, I know this situation and I wanted to like cut ties and it was so hard. And it was constant. It was all throughout the day, every day, just getting voice memos, like so many throughout the night. And like, you're like hearing this anxiety. I could hear it. Voice memos all hours of the night saying, she can't eat, doesn't see her kids. And like,
it's so crazy to hear about those voice memos that Colleen was sending. If Colleen was sending them to Trisha, someone who she wasn't as close with, I'm sure she was sending them out to a bunch of her friends and family. And I'm sure that JoJo was one of them. If Colleen was guilt-tripping and manipulating Trisha to that extent, she's surely doing the same with JoJo as well. And maybe JoJo will realize that one day. Let me know what you guys think about this entire situation in the comments. And as always, I will see you in the next video.